Hi, and welcome to this next episode of the podcast. I'm kicking off something new today, which is I'm going to be talking a bunch about this excellent book of Scott Churchill's, The Essentials of Existential Phenomenological Research. Why? Well, one, because this is the main textbook that I use when I'm teaching phenomenological psychology. But more importantly, because I'm not aiming to do a very tightly wrapped up or stuffy academic presentation about phenomenology. Instead, I'm speaking to people who are interested in how phenomenology is a way of seeing and understanding more deeply the texture of human experience. Whether that's everyday experience, everyday life experience, whether that's consciousness studies, which is my particular area of expertise. This is really not intended as a very linear and highly footnoted discussion. However, this is an excellent book. So I am going to be, particularly because I am teaching this semester using the book, I am going to work with this book as a way of talking with you about what is phenomenologizing, what is it as an experience, really like as an approach to seeing and understanding other humans' experiences in a more essential way. Phenomenology has been deeply transformative in terms of not just the way I do scholarship or academia or publication, but more how I hear people, how I listen to people, how I work either in a counseling context or working with meditators in that kind of consciousness studies context, or we're working as a consultant, working with leaders in business. The way that I listen to people and the way that I work with them to understand their own experiences is deeply impacted by this approach. And that, by the way, reflects this entire tradition that's this bookcase over my right shoulder over here, which is entirely phenomenology. And it's mostly philosophy over there, which brings me to one question that a bunch of my psychology students might have about chapter 1 of this book, which is, hey, I thought I was in a psychology program. How come there's so much philosophy in here? Why are we talking about philosophy so much? Why are we so attached to the philosophical tradition? Well, because philosophy is where our underlying assumptions about the world are clarified, right? And I think that a lot of people in the field of psychology, I mean, at the student level at least, are not maybe at least initially acquainted with the word epistemology. In other words, how do I know what I know? And what are my assumptions about what constitutes knowing anything? Right? And if you are not thoughtful about what your own already present underlying epistemological assumptions are, then you're just like flying blind because you have those assumptions. We all do, right? So a great example of that would be if I can't measure it, it doesn't exist scientifically. Like in order for something to exist as an object of science, I have to be able to measure it and then make predictions about it. Well, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like science is all about measurement, isn't it? All right. But the whole field of qualitative psychology, the whole vision of psychology as also a qualitative human science, much less like the other human sciences like anthropology, sociology, etc., are based on a different epistemology in which knowledge, understanding, and I swear I'm not going to footnote Dilthey right now. Knowledge and understanding are not reducible to what you can count or measure. So if that already is making your head spin, that's fine. It just means that you have been most likely naively inculcated with the mainstream view of what science is, which is it's based on counting and predicting. Another great one that is, I have to have a hypothesis that I'm testing, otherwise I'm not doing research. Well, again, that is one paradigm for doing science, right? It's solid within its context. But phenomenological psychological research is not about having a preconceived explanation for why something is happening, or it's not, that's not the aim. The aim is, again, understanding in a more essential way what is already meaningfully at work in a particular realm of human experience, already granting that the experiences that people bring when we ask them sincere questions about important events in their lives, the meaning is already there for them. It may not be clarified very well because in everyday life we're swimming in meaning. We don't usually pause to deeply reflect and to compare notes about, well, what was it like when I lost that loved one, when I lost that member of my family? What was the experience of loss really like? No, in everyday life, we're living through it. We're grappling with just getting through the experience of loss in this case itself, right? It's already meaningful for us. We don't have to pan back and ask scientific questions about it. I hope you're following me because I think that part of being a lifetime or lifelong learner is assuming that as a discovery process, I'm going to continue to recognize ways in which I'm naive. I'm going to continue to recognize perspectives that I haven't taken to account. And as a beginning student in psychology, it's really important to ask the question, what is the epistemology I've already got? What are my assumptions already about what science is? When I ask that question of students, I would not expect them to have ever thought about that before, because most likely their education did not prepare them for that question. Well, I'm glad to meet you. Now you're getting the question from me. All of that is by way of introduction to Scott's book. This book, and I'm going to continue to hold it up because I love this book so much. It's so valuable because it is a very generous and inclusive introduction to a tradition which has involved many people over the course of a number of different generations of scholars. And I'm talking about within psychology, right? Because the philosophical tradition goes back more than 100 years in phenomenology. Figures like Edmund Husserl, Eugen Fink, two of my favorites right there, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, Emmanuel Levinas, Paul Ricoeur in a different way. All of these are figures who personally are really important to me in philosophy. But within phenomenological psychology, in particular the school that grew up around Duquesne University in the late 60s into the 70s, we had people including Amadeo Giorgi, who I myself did my master's and PhD with, people like Kolesi, Fisher, Van Kam, von Eckertsberg, figures associated with Duquesne University. And by using the term existential phenomenology, Scott, who also came out of that community of researchers as a grad student, is acknowledging the breadth and the variety within that background to this general approach to doing research in psychology. So that's one great value of this book, because it's often the case that in a society that's kind of unfortunately obsessed with branding, that if we use a slightly different word like existential phenomenology versus descriptive phenomenology, students will sometimes assume, oh, that must be a different method because Scott said existential. No, it's not a different method. Descriptive phenomenology and existential phenomenology are two ways of referring to the same approach. All right, having said that, and then leave you to digest what's been said here. Hopefully it will be useful. This book is going to be an introduction to the practice of doing phenomenological research with human beings, which involves gathering rich descriptions of specific experiences in their lives and then working in a careful way to analyze those descriptions, not to impose a pre-existing theory on those stories that we gather from our participants, but rather to extend the trust that as those experiences are already meaningful, intrinsically meaningful for the people who live them, our job as researchers is to look in a more essential way at the meanings that are present, imminently present in those descriptions, and bring out, explicate, make clear what those implicit meanings already are. And I'll draw a parallel here, which is just like in counseling work, a clinician would never assume that someone shows up in their office to meet with them with a fully reflective, carefully laid out interpretation of the meaning of their experiences. Why would that be the case? They're showing up to work with you to understand better what's already going on in their life. And in a very different way, but in a way which is parallel, we do not assume that someone who we interview in a phenomenological interview already has a very reflective and well-developed interpretation, self-interpretation of the meaning of the experience that they're sharing with us. That's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is a description that already stands out to them of an experience that was meaningful for them, period. So if I ask someone to describe an experience of becoming a parent for the first time, or to describe an experience of losing a loved one, I'm not asking for, tell me what you think it means to you. No, I'm asking, tell me what it was like for you, period. Just what it was like in as much detail as possible. That's the beginning of a phenomenological interview. I'm specifically setting aside any attempt to explain the experience. That's not what I'm looking for in phenomenology. Why? Because that invites somebody to already kind of try to come up with a theory or an explanation. That's not what we are looking for in existential phenomenology. We are rather looking to start with the what it was like, the qualia, the what it was like of the experience for that person. And one thing he says in this chapter, which is that every aspect of this approach is directly informed by concepts and reflective procedures borrowed directly from phenomenological philosophy. Why does that matter? It matters because nobody has a trademark on the word phenomenology, right? And if you start to just search online or ask AI what phenomenology means, or whoever you ask, Google, right? You will get a wide variety of meanings because there is no single meaning to that word. If you narrow it down to the phenomenological philosophical tradition beginning with Husserl, that narrows it down a bit for philosophy. But if you're in the world of research, I could name a bunch of different methods that use the word phenomenology in their name or refer to them what they're doing as phenomenological. For this method, there is a careful attention to the philosophical meaning of the terms that are being appropriated in interviewing people. Phenomenology in psychological research is an approach to science. That means automatically we are looking for a kind of objective knowledge. We're not just looking to be stenographers for people's idiosyncratic experiences. We're valuing their individual experiences as examples of something more broadly human. So if someone tells you, oh, well, phenomenology is not concerned with objectivity, not true, not accurate. That's a bad understanding of the tradition as a whole, and it's also a bad understanding of this research method. The way that we understand objectivity is what's at stake, and that is different. We're not going to seek to get to objective understanding through measurement, for example, that's for sure. So participating in the phenomenological tradition, whether it's strictly philosophical or also psychological, is a process of deepening one's own ability to perceive and make discriminations, meaning understanding, of lived experience, whether it's your own or that of others. So that means that the way that you see will change if you practice this approach. It's not the only approach like that. I don't mean it that way, but it is that. It does go that deep. So I'm really happy that Scott made that point in his introduction. And I think that's a good place to stop for today. And you notice we haven't gotten into anything procedural at all about phenomenological research, except that I did actually start to give you a teaser about how interviews are conducted. So hopefully that'll keep you all engaged, and we'll see you next time.